Hi everyone, this is Danny. Let's make ourselves a bottle with some threads on it. Here I have the drawing that I sent around. If some of you have been intrepid enough to try and make it on your own, I commend you. The first thing we're going to do is create a new plane. Actually, the first thing you should do is save it. Save it with the appropriate file format and save yourself some headaches. But after you've saved it and given it a real name, come onto the front plane and create a sketch. I'll look at that sketch. And from the master sketch, I'm going to borrow just this line. I'll convert that. I use my shortcut key, but you could use the convert entities. Select, then hit OK, checkbox. And I'm going to hide my master sketch just so I can see what I'm doing. I will make this into construction geometry, and I'll begin to draw my threads. I'll draw a vertical line. I'll draw a slightly diagonal line. It's not vertical, it's not horizontal, it's just at a random angle. I'll draw another vertical line, and I'll connect the corners. Now I have this wonky trapezoid. I should be able to move it like this. If your line is stuck right here, you may find that this line comes in black and you can't move it. Just view your sketch relations and see this coincident constraint. SolidWorks thought when you drew this line that it wanted to be connected to that line, that point there. You can delete that coincident constraint and then you can move that line again. The only reason I mention that is because it happened to me when I first made this part, so I would hate for you guys to get stuck the same place. I was surprised by that constraint. So I've got this model. Now I want my thread profile to be symmetrical. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a construction line between the midpoint of this vertical line and the midpoint of this vertical line. I can make sure that I'm getting the midpoint by mousing over until I see that big dot in the center. I'll click it, and then I'll come over here and click that dot as well. Now I'll make this line horizontal, and what should happen is changes I make by dragging one end of this vertical line should be mirrored about that central line that I just drew. If this isn't happening, select the endpoints of your horizontal line and make sure that they have the midpoint constraint on both ends. Now we just need some dimensions. Let's make these threads 2.5 millimeters tall. In changing that, it seems my sketch has gotten wonked out slightly, but that's no reason to panic. I can just easily drag it back into the proper shape. I will make these threads 3 millimeters deep, and by selecting these two non-parallel lines, I will give them a taper of 4 degrees. This is just so they will slide together more easily. Very few threads are actually square. All right. So why did I draw that thread profile on a secondary sketch instead of the first master sketch? It's just going to make it a little bit easier for us to grab this feature in the future. So to prevent myself from accidentally consuming it into a sketch, I will give this a name. Doesn't matter what you name it. As long as you know that FuncMasterThreads, or whatever name you pick, is never to be consumed by a feature. I only intend to reference that. I'll treat it the same way as I treat the master sketch. Next up, I'm going to create a sketch on the front plane, and I would like to copy in bulk all of the lines in my master sketch. Not the threads, but the master sketch that shows the whole bottle. Now I could click the Convert Entities button and then select one by one all of these lines. I find that fairly tedious, especially when I need almost everything in a sketch. So what I can do is select the sketch, just click on it once, and then go to Convert Entities and click it. And then instantaneously it copies all of the lines that are not construction lines. So that saved me some time. I'll hide my master sketch again so I'm not confused by which lines I'm editing and which lines are underlying those. And I'll look at this from the front. Next up, I'm going to use my trim tool, and I'm going to trim away these corners and any unnecessary, unwanted lines that I just use to construct the shape. There we go, down here at the bottom. Because I'm only going to be making the bottom of this bottle, for starters, I'll remove the lid as well. Should have something that looks like this. Now I'll draw some lines to complete my shape. I'll draw a vertical line, and I'll draw a horizontal line. If these lines come out blue, click on them and make sure they have the horizontal and the vertical constraint applied. And now I'm ready to revolve this into a bottle. So I'll go from within the sketch, I'll go to Features, Revolved, Boss, or Base. I'll select my axis of revolution, and then I'll click this central vertical line. You can see I get the yellow preview. It looks right. I'll hit the green checkbox. Looking pretty bodily. Yeah, bodily. Next, I'd like to make the lid. I'm going to make the base and then the lid. So to keep things clear, to keep my workspace free of clutter, I'm going to right-click Revolve One and hide it. It's still there, I just don't want to look at it right now. So I've got my sketches turned back on. I'm going to come into the front plane, make a new sketch, and grab these lines that define the cap. You see this vertical line here extends past where I need the cap to be, but that's fine because I know I can just trim it. Now I'll complete this sketch by closing it off with a vertical line drawn from the center and a horizontal line drawn to that corner there. No need for dimensions because those are all dimensioned in the master sketch already. Now we can revolve this feature. Axis of revolution. Pick that center. I see I get a preview of the cap. And you'll see this merge result box is unchecked by default. That's because even though there is another body in here, it could be merged with that body, but even though there's a body here, I have it hidden. And so it's going to assume that I don't want to merge it. It's going to assume correctly. If I had the bottle shown, this merge result feature would be turned on by default, and I want to make sure I uncheck it. One way or another, I want to make this cap without merging it. The way we can check to make sure we've done that is after revolving the cap, we should start to see this solid bodies folder. And now we've got two bodies. We've got Revolve 1, which is our base, and Revolve 2, which is our cap. If you don't have that, make sure that Revolve 2 has merge bodies turned off. All right. Next up, I'm going to make the helix that will create my threads. So to make it a little bit clearer to see what's going on, I'm going to hide the cap. I can do that by right-clicking the feature that created it in the feature tree. I could also right-click the cap itself and hit hide. All right. On this flat surface here, let me turn my sketch on. You can see my thread begins right at the corner. This is my thread. And it begins right under this surface at the corner where this vertical line intersects. So I'm going to turn my sketches off, and I'm going to create a new sketch on this flat surface. So now I'm sketching on this imaginary flat plane right here. What I can do is draw a circle that begins at the origin, so make sure to click that red little arrow thing here. That's the center of the universe, or at least the center of this sketch. I'm going to draw a circle. I'll draw it an arbitrary size. I should be able to change the size, but I shouldn't be able to move it from the center because it's connected to the origin. Turn my sketches back on, and now I'll click on this point. Hope you can all see that. It's the top point on the thread. And I'll select the sketch at the same time, I'm sorry, the circle in my sketch at the same time, and I'll give them a coincident constraint. What that's done is it snapped that sketch, it snapped that circle onto that point, keeping it exactly where we want it. From here, I will go to Insert, Curve, Helix/Spiral. All right, well, see, I'd gone through this already. So say it comes in with some pretty unhelpful, you might start off with something like this, which pretty clearly not what we want. Because I know from my master sketch that this line is 15, the height of my stem is 15 millimeters, I know the height of my threads is going to be 15 millimeters. So I'm going to pick a series of constraints that allow me to at least define the height. I'll pick height and pitch. That's in this defined by height and pitch drop-down menu. This might be minimized on your screen. Just pop it open with the arrow. Same goes for anything else in a feature creation menu. If I'm looking at something that's not on your screen, look for these arrows that might be hiding them from view. So, as I said, I know from the master sketch that the height is 15 millimeters, and I can tell by verifying that looks pretty perfect. And the pitch, I'm going to double the height of the thread. So right now my thread is 2.5 millimeters high. We entered that manually. I'll make the pitch 5 millimeters. And that will give me room for a positive thread, and then a space, and then a positive thread again, and a space, so that our threads are spaced evenly. And I'm just going to make sure that my threads are checked onto counterclockwise, because it's America, and we unscrew to the left. And our start angle, this might come in as some completely useless dimension, but I know I want my helix to start right over here where my thread is sketched. So punch in 0. 0's on the other side, so I know I want it to be 180. There we go. What I've done is I've found the start angle that lines the bottom of the helix up with the start of the sketch that I'm going to sweep around it. All right. Happy with this? I'll hit the green checkbox. Next up is to borrow some lines from my thread master sketch. I'm not going to use this sketch. I'm not going to consume it because I'll need it later. But what I will do is copy it. I'll convert entities from it. So creating yet another new sketch on the front plane, I will select the thread sketch, and I'll click Convert Entities. And what that does is just pops the whole sketch right into my new sketch. You can see that right there. You'll have to exit the sketch to do this. So I'll complete my sketch by clicking the blue arrow. And I will click in the workspace a couple times, hit escape, make sure you have nothing pre-selected. I'll click on Swept Boss / Base. And both of these should be blank. Now, take a look right up here. This seemingly innocuous series of text and this little icon right here, that's a representation of the file you're working in. If you hit this arrow, you will see a copy of your feature tree. The nice thing about the feature tree, this little copy of the feature tree, is you can directly select exactly the sketch you want. If I try to click on a sketch in the workplace somewhere, I might be clicking the master sketch, or I might be clicking the sketch I converted. So I don't want to accidentally consume my master sketch. So what I'll do is I will, from within the sweep feature, I'll open this drop-down arrow, and I will select as the profile sketch 5, the sketch I just made. Then as the profile, as the, what do you call this thing? The path. The path is the shape along which my profile becomes stretched out. I will select the helix, again, from the drop-down menu right here. And there we go. I get a nice preview. It looks like my threads are going in the right direction. So that's a good sign. And what I will do is I don't want this to be merged. So what I'm going to do is check options, which is minimized, and I'll uncheck merge result. That'll become clear, the reason will become clear in a second. I'll hit OK on sweep, and now I should have 3 bodies in my scene. I have my bottle base, I have my hidden lid, and I have this chunk of threads. The next thing I'm going to do is trim off the piece of thread that I don't want. So what I'll do is I'll hide my bottle. Right-click the bottle, hit hide. Now I'm looking at just my threads. And you can see how the threads extend below where we need them to. So, creating yet another new sketch on the front plane, I will convert that horizontal line. You may have just noticed this, but when I convert construction geometry, it comes through as a regular full-blooded line. If I really want it to be construction geometry, I could select it again and hit for construction, but that's fine because I actually do want it to be a real line. Next, I'll draw a line off in this direction. I'll make them equal to one another. And then I'll just finish out this rectangle. The purpose of this rectangle is I'm going to use it to generate an extrude cut to slice away the unnecessary extra thread. So let's just give it an arbitrary height of, 15, why not? I can clearly see that 15 extends beyond where I need it to, so that won't be a problem. Which is to say it extends beyond the size of the thing that I need to cut. Features, extruded cut, through all, both, because I really want to get rid of everything that's in my way. And what this will do, accept, is it slices away the bits of threads that were going to be where we don't need them. I'll turn my bottle back on by selecting it from the solid bodies folder. Right click and click show, and it'll show up again. And I'm almost ready to combine the threads with my bottle. The one thing I want to do before that, though, is to shell this bottle out. So what I'm going to do is select my shell feature. You can also go to Insert, Features, Shell, if you're having a hard time finding it on your ribbon. I'm going to select the top face, and I'm going to pick an arbitrary thickness of 1.5 millimeters. Now, why did I go through all the trouble of making the threads and then trimming them, keeping them separate from the bottle just to shell the bottle? The answer is because I don't want to shell the threads. I want this face, let me hide my helix to make it easier to see. I want this face to be smooth. I don't want SolidWorks to try and hollow out the inside of these threads. So now that I've got my bottle shelled and I've got my excess threads trimmed away, I can combine the thread body and the bottle body. That's fun to say. I can do that by using the combine feature. That's up here in your ribbon. Again, you can also go to Insert, Features, Combine. You have a few options, but I'm going to stick with Add. Then I'll select Bodies to Combine and click the threads and the bottle, or the bottle and the threads. As long as you get them both, when you hit the green checkbox, you'll see I'm down to 2 bodies again. Now, my bottle and my threads are permanently fused. Looking good. Next up, we're going to need to put some threads in the cap. Before we do that, let's take a look at what we've got so far. So, show your lid by right-clicking and hitting Show. I'll select the front view, as you can see, and I'll click the section view. Sectioning with the front plane, I'll hit the green checkbox. I'm not actually creating a feature. The section is just a quick way to inspect your part. And now I can see that my cap is smushing my threads. My cap is on top of my threads. So we need to cut some female threads into the cap. I'll turn my section off by clicking the section view button again. I will hide the bottom bottle by right-clicking and hit hide. And I'm ready to use this same master sketch. It's a good thing we didn't consume it because we're going to use it again by, you guessed it, yet another sketch on the front plane. And I will convert Func Master Threads, sketch, convert entities. And I watch closely on this next part. I turn my sketches off so I can see what I'm doing. I will right-click, go to my favorite, oh, I guess I'm off your screen, aren't I? Right-click, Sketch Tools, Offset Entities. also lives up here in your ribbon, offset entities. If I select this guy, oops. All right, teachable moment. You see this blue face? SolidWorks thinks I'm trying to offset this face because I had it pre-selected. I'll hit escape a couple of times, make sure nothing is selected, then click offset entities and select the sketch. There we go. I'll select one line, I'll hit select chain, and SolidWorks will pick out all of the connected lines. And I'll make my base geometry construction because I only want the offset geometry. What I'm doing now is I am changing the size of this sketch so that when I cut the threads, I'll cut a thread that's slightly bigger than the thread that we just swept around the bottle neck. What that's going to do is it's going to give our cap some room. We'll call that clearance. And this is how we accomplish that. I should finish my sentence. We'll give it some room to thread on without too much friction. There we go. I'll finish that sketch. And we're ready once again to create a swept feature, except instead of adding material, we're going to be subtracting material. So we'll do that by selecting not swept boss base, but instead swept cut, which lives right over here. Swept cut works exactly the same way. I bet you can guess what it's going to do. It's going to sweep and remove instead of sweep and add. So for my profile, I'll come again to my little feature tree clone. I'll hit sketch 7. And then for my path, I'll select my helix/spiral. Looking good. Green checkbox completes the feature. And now we can see we have some threads removed from the inside of the cap. I'm a fan. All right, let's show our bottle bottom. And what we're left with, examining with the section tool, is a cap and a threaded bottleneck that don't overlap, they don't intersect. They interlock, but they're not existing in the same space. And that is what we wanted. Okay, one last thing before we go. This is to illustrate the power of the master sketch and how it allows you to retain creative control over your projects. Now that I've finished this bottle, all these features are made. If I want to change the shape of this bottle, and that's totally reasonable. Maybe I modeled it and didn't like the way it felt in my hand, or maybe I got a feedback from the vendor that said, "Hey, we can't do it that tight. We have to make this angle a little bit less tight." Maybe I bump that up to 20 degrees. Hit the checkbox. Boom. My one change in my master sketch has updated the entire bottle. See, as I section it, the uniform wall thickness is still in place. I can make even more changes if I want to. As long as the changes I'm making don't violate any of the rules that I've laid out in the master sketch, should be good to go. And if I do run into a situation where something turns yellow or red and breaks, I can always undo the change or try and figure out exactly what's causing it to go wrong and make further changes to correct the model. I just tweaked a whole bunch of dimensions, and SolidWorks instantaneously updates that into the model. So if I had randomly or arbitrarily drew this, if I had failed to dimension it, if I was looking at a big blue sketch instead of a black, fully defined sketch, I would have a very difficult time exerting control and modifying this to exactly what I wanted. Dragging and dropping is not a professional way. It's not an adequate way, and you'll never quite get exactly where you want it to be. So you want to be able to control all of your features with dimensions. Let's make this a really weird bottle. One really weird bottle, instantaneously. So experiment to your heart's content, but please remember the most important lesson in all this is to be accurate, thorough, and thoughtful with your sketches. Draw them in such a way that you'll be able to change them later. Draw them with rigor. When something breaks, don't get frustrated. Just try and figure it out, try and fix it. If you get stuck, email me. I want all of you guys to be able to make models from scratch that you can manipulate just the same way that I'm doing this. Thanks for listening. Sorry this went a little bit long, but I hope it's helpful. You're welcome for giving you the freebie sketch. All right, I'll see you guys next week.